You have done work looking at how indigenous women are helping shape justice in Latin America. And you tell the story of Quechua women in the highlands in Ecuador and the impact they had on their communities. Who are these women?
The Quechua women of Chimborazo, it's the poorest province in Ecuador. It's up in the highlands, in the middle of the country. A group of them, the Association of Quechua and Rural Women of Chimborazo, in 2008 got together to guarantee their participation in the administration of justice. So the fact is that state justice completely ignores and overlooks the well-being of indigenous women. If non-indigenous women in Ecuador are left out of justice, it's even worse for indigenous women. So they got together after many cases of domestic violence and thought, how do we improve our lives? How we improve our well-being? How do we guarantee some rights in our daily lives? And in 2008, there was a constitutional reform in Ecuador. So they got together and decided to propose as a government plan to the members of Congress, to introduce within indigenous justice the participation with decision-making power of women.
How did they even figure out how to do this? This sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was.
They're in the middle of nowhere in the country, in the highlands.
And they're mostly literate. There's only one of them who went to school. So it's a group of about 200 women, peasants. None of them finished high school. Only one went to universities. So they're really just trying to improve their daily conditions, right? And they started thinking, let's see how indigenous women are protecting themselves and what they're asking for. And they couldn't find anything. So those who could read and go on the internet, especially Cristina Cucuri, who was the only one in the group who had gone to university, plugged on the internet to look at the Constitution of Bolivia, the Zapatista women, what were their demands. She didn't find anything in international law or in constitutional rights that specifically addressed indigenous women, right? So there was the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, international documents that talked about women, but not specifically indigenous women. And there was the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that had just one article that said all of the rights herein are also valid for women. So they really did a legal triangulation. They first went to see a lawyer who was a specialist on collective rights, and they said, we want to have help with the text to propose to the Constituent Assembly on indigenous women's rights in the administration of justice. And the lawyer said, oh, but this is impossible because collective rights cannot be imposed upon themselves. They're rights to self-determination of the indigenous communities, and we cannot bring individual women's rights, struggles from feminist movements in the West, upon the communities. And the women were like, but why not? How did women's rights develop in the West, in Europe? And the lawyer said, well, it was a long story, a long process of inventing rights, right? The suffragettes and the first wave of feminism and the second wave of feminism. And the women were like, but that's what we want. We also want to invent rights of our own. And the lawyer was adamant, no, we can't impose women's rights into collective rights. So they didn't get help from anywhere. They couldn't find it in constitutional law. The lawyer didn't want to help them. So they just copy-paste the 4 words from the UN Declaration with their own ideas, and they really just had 2 sentences that they brought to the Constitutional Assembly saying, in the administration of justice, we ask that all these international treaties that the country signed be also valid not only for non-indigenous women in the country, but within the community. So we ask you as lawmakers to force indigenous law to respect international women's rights and to impose the equal participation of women with decision-making power, so it's not decorative, in the administration of justice.
Why were they not protected as indigenous women?
I think women in Latin America in general fall through the cracks. There are very high rates of femicide, for instance, a lot of domestic violence, and it's very hard for women who are raped, who are assassinated, to get any kind of justice. Indigenous women who are poor, who are illiterate, and who are in rural areas have even less access to law. And then there is the fact that democracy cannot be the same for everybody. Rights should be differentiated. Democracy must be differentiated, because if there's domestic violence in the city, maybe you can leave your house and go to shelter. In rural areas where you are in charge of animals, you cannot just leave the animals and go to shelter. So we need different solutions for different women living in different contexts, right? So they were worried about that. And they know very well that as indigenous women, they suffer discrimination from being indigenous, from the state, and for being women from the men in their communities. So they were abandoned by the state for being indigenous, by their communities for being women, and they were really the bottom of society in terms of access to rights.
What does the legal system now look like for indigenous women?
So now the law says that all collective rights, and in particular the administration of justice, has to count with the participation with decision-making power of women. It's the first time in Latin America that any constitution recognizes rights to indigenous women. So it was implicit before, but not explicit, and there is a value to be stated explicitly in the law. But when you write the law saying in the management of justice, women have to have the same position. We want gender parity. We want the same number of male judges and female judges. That's revolutionary. It's not going to fix everything, but it's a beginning to lessen the harm, to lessen domestic violence, right, and to put women in charge. And the more women you put in the administration of justice, the more you protect yourself. The interesting thing is that instead of doing it within the government, they decided to do it within their local governments, indigenous governments on their territories. Right? So they're not trying to acquire rights within the state. They're reinforcing self-determination by practicing their own forms of justice. And the state is just the arbiter. It's the mediator, nothing else. So we ask the state to put it into law, but we practice it in total autonomy in our territories. So in a way, local territories are abiding to international law.
What does it mean for the future of indigenous women in Ecuador and maybe throughout this hemisphere?
Hopefully in the world, because it's something that's revolutionary. They're inventing new forms of justice that are independent from the state, although inscribed within the state. That are inspiring, hopefully, other women and non-indigenous women to take justice into their own hands and reshape the way we manage justice so that we can have a chance to protect our lives and live better lives. And where it's very interesting is that we see in Europe state sovereignty being reshaped. So we have, for instance, the European Union. All of the administration of justice goes up to supranational level within the European Union. And this has implications on the state because the state doesn't have the monopoly of justice anymore. And what indigenous women are doing in Latin America is that they're doing the same thing but from within. So instead of dislocating legal authority above in supranational European courts, they're dislocating legal authority within their communities in spaces of self-determination, and they're changing the state. And they're minimizing the monopoly of justice that the state has. They're creating de facto, on the ground, self-determination that is improving their lives. So hopefully this is going to inspire all women everywhere to try to get into government, get into justice, and protect future generations to come in.